In a small, windswept village nestled between ancient mountains, lived a young man named Kale. He was known not for his strength or his wit, but for his scattered mind. His thoughts were like a flock of startled birds, flying in 1,000 different directions at once. He would start to mend a fence, only to be distracted by a strangely shaped cloud. He would begin a conversation, only to lose his train of thought to a distant melody. His days were a chaotic tapestry of unfinished tasks and unrealized intentions, leaving him with a constant, gnawing sense of frustration. He longed for focus, for the kind of inner stillness he saw in the eyes of the village elders, a calm that seemed as unshakable as the mountains themselves. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, Kale sought the counsel of the oldest woman in the village, Alara. She was a master potter, her hands gnarled and stained with a lifetime of clay. Yet her movements were precise and deliberate. Her pots were legendary, not just for their beauty, but for their perfect balance and form. Kale found her by her wheel, her eyes closed, her hands gently shaping a lump of wet earth. He watched, mesmerized, as the formless clay rose under her touch, becoming a graceful vase, as if by magic. He waited until the wheel slowed to a stop before he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Ilara, my mind is a storm. I cannot command it. How do you find such peace, such focus? How do you discipline your mind?" Ilara opened her eyes, which held the depth of a clear, still lake. She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured to a rough, unshaped lump of clay on a nearby table. "Discipline is not about caging a storm, young Kale," she said, her voice as smooth as worn river stones. "It is about learning to shape the clay. Your mind is this clay. It is not your enemy. It is your raw material. Your first task is not to fight it, but to understand it. Sit. Watch your thoughts. Do not judge them, do not chase them, and do not push them away. Simply observe them as you would observe clouds drifting across the sky." For the next week, Kale did exactly as she said. He would go to the quietest spot he could find, a small clearing by a gurgling stream, and he would sit. At first, it was torture. His mind screamed with a cacophony of worries, daydreams, and fragments of song. He wanted to jump up, to run, to do anything but sit with the chaos in his head. But he remembered Alara's words, "Simply observe so we watch it." He watched his anxiety about the unmended fence rise like a dark cloud. He watched a memory of a childhood game drift by like a wisp of smoke. He watched his frustration with himself bubble up and then fade away. He didn't engage. He just named them. There is worry. There is a memory. There is frustration. Slowly, miraculously, something began to shift. By simply observing the thoughts without feeding them energy, they began to lose their power over him. The storm didn't vanish, but he was no longer lost in it. He was becoming the sky, vast and unchanging, through which the clouds of thought passed. When a week had passed, he returned to Alara. He told her of his experience, of the small pockets of stillness he had begun to find. She nodded, her gaze approving. "You have taken the first and most important step," she said. "You have separated yourself from your thoughts. Now, you must learn to give your mind a single point of focus. A restless mind needs an anchor." She handed him a small, smooth stone. "Tomorrow morning, go back to your spot. Hold this stone. Focus all your attention on it. Feel its texture, its coolness, its weight in your hand. When your mind wanders, as it will, gently and without judgment, guide it back to the stone. Do this not once, not twice, but 100 times, if you must. The act of returning is the practice. The returning is the discipline." The next day, Kale sat by the stream, the stone in his palm. His mind was a wild horse, bucking and pulling at the reins. It galloped to what he needed to do that day, what someone had said to him yesterday, what he feared about tomorrow. Each time, he felt a jolt of frustration, but he remembered Alira's gentle voice, gently, without judgment. He took a breath, and imagined gently taking the reins and guiding the horse back to the stone, he would whisper to himself. He focused on the tiny grooves on its surface, the way the morning light reflected off its polished face. The first day was a battle. He felt he had spent more time wandering than focusing. But he persisted. Day after day, he returned to the stream, to the stone. Slowly, the periods of focused attention grew longer. The wandering became less frantic. He was not caging the horse, but teaching it to walk calmly beside him. The anchor was holding. After another week, Alara gave him his next task. "You have learned to observe and to anchor," she said, her hands already working a new piece of clay on her wheel. "Now, you must learn to direct your focus with intention. Discipline is not just stillness. It is purposeful action. Choose one task for your morning, just one. It can be small, mending a single section of the fence, chopping wood for 1 hour, or reading a single chapter of a book. For that block of time, that task is your stone. Give it your entire being. When your mind wanders to the 100 other things you could be doing, gently guide it back. Immerse yourself in the feeling of the wood, the rhythm of the axe, the words on the page. Be fully present in the doing." Cale chose to mend the fence. The first morning, his old habits flared. As he hammered a nail, his mind drifted to the market, to a conversation he needed to have, to the leak in his roof. But this time, he was prepared. He had his anchor. He stopped, took a breath, felt the rough texture of the wooden post under his hand, and focused on the single nail in front of him. He brought his full attention to the act of hammering the arc of his arm, the solid thud of the hammer, the slow sinking of the nail into the wood. He finished one section, perfectly and securely, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a mended fence, it was a victory. It was proof that he could direct his mental energy. He learned that a disciplined mind wasn't about doing more things, but about doing one thing with complete presence. As weeks turned into months, Cale integrated these practices into his life. He began each day with observation, a few moments of watching his thoughts without judgment. He used his breath as an anchor throughout the day, a constant stone he could return to. He approached his work with singular focus, dedicating blocks of time to specific tasks, immersing himself in them completely. The change was remarkable. His work was no longer a collection of half-finished projects, but a series of completed, well-crafted endeavors. His conversations became deeper, as he learned to truly listen instead of being lost in his own mental chatter. The frantic, startled flock of birds in his mind had learned to fly in formation. The storm had not vanished, but he had learned to be its calm, unshakable center. One final evening, Cale went to see Alara. He didn't go with a question, but with a gift. He presented her with a small, perfectly carved wooden bird, its lines smooth and its form graceful. Alara took it, her knowing smile returning. "You have learned, Cale," she said softly. "You have learned that the mind is not a master to be feared, but a tool to be honed. Discipline is not a punishment. It is an act of profound self-care. It is the path from chaos to clarity, from frustration to fulfillment. You have not caged the storm. You have learned to harness its power to create beauty." Cale looked out at the mountains, standing serene and powerful against the twilight sky. He finally understood. The discipline he sought was never about restriction. It was about freedom. The freedom to choose where to place his attention. The freedom to be fully present in his own life. The freedom to take the formless clay of his potential and shape it into a life of purpose and peace. He had become the potter of his own mind.